Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
This one we believe was the head maid where she slept.
I want to cry. Somebody the maid was involved with? Sadness.
A loss or a tragedy, you think?
You're both. Sobbing and crying in a corner. I gotta get out of here.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey. Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Welcome to the first episode of Afraid of Nothing. I'm Bob Heskey. Our guest today is Brad Hudson, but he's also known as Little Frog, his medicine name given to him by Spirit during his first vision quest in the Green Mountain National Forest of Vermont. Brad is a shamanic healer, teacher, multidimensional energy healer, ordained minister, and a best-selling author on Amazon. His books include The Truth About You, Who You Are and Why You're Here on Earth, Shamanic Depossession and Other True Healing Miracles, and Vision Quest, True Stories from the Wilderness. Brad was one of the main subjects of my documentary Afraid of Nothing, and had some interesting experiences walking some of New England's most haunted houses and clearing a Ouija board possessed by 7 demons in Salem, Massachusetts. He also had a crazy experience with my daughter Emily, who's autistic and has had a few paranormal experiences of her own. One can be seen on YouTube called The Ghost in Emily's Crib. Brad's website is www.littlefroghealing.com. And with that, let's get on with the interview. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Hey, Bob. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm great.
I worked with you on the film, and so I've had some great experiences with you, but I wanted to really introduce you to my audience for my first podcast, so I really appreciate you being available for me.
Oh, thank you. Happy to do it.
So we're going to start with some of the basic questions here, and then we'll kind of go off on a tangent if you want, all right? And the first question is, you became a shaman in midlife, and that's kind of a story in itself. Can you kind of just tell our listeners how you went from being a rock merchandise guy to becoming a shaman?
Yeah, it was definitely a later in life thing. I was 55. I was having a spiritual awakening, although I didn't know what it was at the time. I was just feeling that something very important was missing from my life. My mother had passed from cancer a few years prior. That really hit me hard. I thought that dying was like the last episode of The Sopranos, where everything just went black. So I wasn't in a good place. And my sister taught me Reiki. So I started learning that there was more to this universe. And I started investigating other possibilities. I went to mediumship classes. That didn't work. I was unable to channel people. I could channel animals, no problem, but not people. And then one day I found out that the Foundation for Shamanic Studies out of San Francisco had a basic weekend workshop in Rome, Massachusetts. At the end of the weekend, I remember telling my instructors, Nan and David, I said, guys, thanks for an amazing weekend, but you didn't teach me anything, but you helped me remember everything. That's when I knew that I had been a shaman in many lifetimes, because it came so easily to me. That was the beginning of my journey. That was 2012.
Did you wonder, like, if you're going crazy, or did you feel great? Was it a wonderful, thing like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting to live my whole life? Or did it scare you? Or what was that like?
For me, it was very unsettling because I knew that I was missing something, but I had no idea what it was. It's very difficult to put into words. I owned a concert merchandising company. It was very successful, wonderful wife and son, family. I had everything, but I just knew something was missing. Once I discovered the shamanism, I went right to taking the healing classes that the Foundation for Shamanic Studies offered and realized that I was meant to be a healer. I pursued that. And then my specialty, which is depossession, attachment removal, showed up in due course.
It's funny because I met you at my house. My wife, now my ex-wife, actually knew you and brought you to meet our daughter, Emily, who's autistic. And at the time, you were working with a lot of parents of autistic children. And then you kind of evolved maybe a couple months later to demonic depossession, which is kind of like a total 180-degree swing. But, can you just kind of tell us kind of how Spirit brought you from focusing on autistic children and then when it turned the other way to deal with kind of the dark side?
The autistic thing was just kind of an offshoot. I was working with someone in the next town from me, and her daughter was autistic, and she was 3 or 4. And she was having a difficult time with her daughter. And I was in her basement, and all of a sudden I received a download of information about autistic kids. And I just started repeating what I was hearing in my head. And she broke into tears because it was exactly what she had been experiencing. When I met Emily, that was crazy for me because I had an experience that very few of my shamanic friends have replicated, and that was doing a journey for Emily. I believe she had a little touch of pneumonia or a spot in her lung, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So I did a journey to her spirit body to work on her, and she showed up in my journey. And it was the wildest thing. I mean, she was there, standing right next to me while I was working on her. And she was very interested in everything. And then when it came time to leave, I asked her if she needed help getting home. And she said, oh, no, I know where I'm going. And said goodbye and disappeared.
Yeah, that was crazy when we got that email from you, and you kind of explained that. I was like, of all the hundreds to thousands of journeys that you've done, I mean, look, there's this process, right? You want to just walk us very quickly through the process where you go to the rock or the cave, and then you go to the tree and whatever, and there's at some point in that journey she was waiting for you, right?
Yeah. I usually go, I have 50 acres of Audubon land in my backyard. I'm very fortunate. And I usually walk out in my mind, I'm walking out into the woods to a very specific tree, and I press a button on the tree, and it's like an elevator door opens up, and I step in, and I go down to the lower world, the shamanic lower world. And Emily was standing waiting for me at the tree. You could have knocked me over with a feather. It was an incredibly amazing, beautiful experience. And it really verified a lot of the stuff that I knew about autistic kids. And now I have an autistic grandson who's 2 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's extremely interesting in working with him. And we get to watch him one day or 1.5 days a week. So I continue to have work with the autistic kids.
I'll tell you, she felt better the next day after you did that. And she was kind of like translate laying down right about the time you said you were doing it. So kind of an eye-opener. You remember when I first met you. Look, I was skeptic, right? I mean, you sensed it. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
you were like, no way. This stuff is not real.
You don't look like the typical shaman. You look more kind of like a rock merchandise guy. You're kind of you're a good-looking guy, but you're a bigger guy, kind of bald, and you look like you don't look like an Indian healer that you used to.
I look like a biker.
A biker. I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and you have this great, wonderful, deep baritone that we're hearing and stuff, and but it's funny. After you left, I said, God, I feel like I got to make a movie with him in it, And it took like 6 months for me to kind of settle with it. We did, but it's great. And let's go on and talk about how did you go from that to demonic depossession? Was there like one patient or one event that had you kind of change and realize that that's what you should focus on?
Well, it was during I was taking the 2-week Foundation for Shamanic Studies Healing Intensive in Virginia. And one day at lunch, some of the ladies in the group, I think there were about 26 of us total, were talking about Betsy Bergstrom and her compassionate depossession program in Seattle. And as soon as I heard the word depossession, it's like every cell in my body became alive. I burst into their conversation and wanted to know everything that they knew about it, and immediately went online, signed up for the next class that Betsy had. And it turns out I've been doing this for, again, many lifetimes. The depossession part of it makes perfect sense for me because I have no fear of any of these beings, of these, what I call critters. These things are really nasty and come in and completely ruin people's lives. I love clearing them using divine love, which is not like an exorcism. It's not a battle or anything like that, but I use divine love to very gently remove them and take them to the light and cross them so they can get on with their divine work, their eternal divine work. So when I went to Betsy's class, she teaches a very specific way of doing depossession, which I used for probably about 3 or 4 months. And then I started receiving downloads of different ways to do it, because her way, which is a wonderful, wonderful way, very compassionate, it takes a long time. And so it could, you could have 30 minutes, 40 minutes into a depossession. I wanted to do it faster. I also wanted to go up against the most evil of the evil. So I began receiving downloads of how to do it faster, whereas today it takes me about 5 minutes to depossess someone, successfully depossess them.
Could just interject real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah.
During the filming, you did a depossession on a young lady. Have you seen her since that? Has she need to be cleared since you did the depossession?
Yeah. She had been a regular client and would see me every couple of months for clearing work because she was like a magnet for bad stuff. After we did that one, Bob, she got back in touch with me, said she had met a young lady that she fell in love with from Ireland, and she moved to Ireland. But her life, she said, was fantastic. She had no further problems with attachments of any kind. So I felt very, very good about that.
No, that was great. It was, and you're right. It took probably a little more than 5 minutes, I think, when we were there. And it's, this was like a couple years ago when we shot the film.
Right.
And I saw you at the screening at the Boston Sci-Fi, and you had mentioned, no, it wasn't. I'm sorry. It was actually, you couldn't make that because we had a storm. Every time I have a film at Boston Sci-Fi, there's always a blizzard. Had it with my first film, too.
It was the second time that I saw it.
Yeah, we had a second screening there. And you had mentioned, and what I want to talk about a little bit later is you'd mentioned how your kind of process has evolved. And I think you've met with some badder, more meaner. It's almost like spirit has kind of introduced you to the tougher adversaries as you went along. I wanted to, if you don't mind, just talk about a couple of, in the film, Afraid of Nothing, a couple of places that you went to and your recollections of that. And then I want to talk about kind of what you've been doing the past couple of years and kind of some of your most memorable experiences. So the first place we went was the Lizzie Borden house, Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. And as I remember, not to put words in your mouth, you were kind of skeptical going there. I mean, you said, I'll try it, but you didn't really think you'd pick up on much. And then when you walked in, you were kind of surprised at all the stuff you were getting. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. I had never been there. Of course, everybody knows the story of Lizzie. And I was skeptical because it's a tourist attraction. They want to put out as many horrifying stories as possible to attract people. So, when I showed up, I really was not expecting anything at all. And I'll never forget walking through that door in the rear of the house and just being bombarded with spirits. That was a very, very active house. No question about that.
Now, the second place we went to was the S.K. Pierce Haunted Victorian Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. And I remember we got there and you felt something like there was laughter or whatever at the front door. And then when we went in, it was the first floor, you weren't picking up much. But then on the second floor and to the third floor, things started getting kind of freaky. And then in the cellar, you had one of your stronger experiences.
Yeah, the first floor I didn't get much. But when we went to the second floor, I remember there was one room where I broke down in tears because the overwhelming sadness in that room. And if I remember correctly, I believe it was the owner's. I don't remember, Bob, if it was a girlfriend or if it was like an employee.
Yeah, what I remember from it, because I've done editing of the film, I've seen it a million times, was on the second floor, there was a room where you didn't pick up something, but I remember Marion and Mimi Watson said, Brad, something just whoosh, like a thing of light left. And you're like, that's why I'm not picking up stuff. And that was the girlfriend. That was kind of that was kind of the live-in nanny that Mr. Pierce was having an affair with. And there was another place on the second floor where they used to, play pool and stuff. And there was this big kind of closet where a lot of bad stuff went down. And you picked up a lot of negative stuff there. And then when we went to the third floor, there was a room. It was a servant. And I don't know if you recall, but you were, it was shocking because you don't usually see you kind of say, I got to get out of here. Usually you're fearless, but it wasn't because you were scared. It was because the emotion was so strong. And that was a servant that was cuddled in a corner, I believe, crying and really sad. And that was on the third floor, actually, that happened.
Yeah, that was a while ago. And if my memory serves, that was the room where I believe that servant had a child to the owner, and the child was removed from her, and she was just absolutely beside herself with grief. Because I remember that must have been the room where I started crying. And I do remember saying I had to leave because it was the emotions were absolutely overwhelming, and I just could not stay in that room at all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then we went down to the basement where you picked up on a drowning.
Oh gosh, I can't remember the exact words that I was hearing, but I think you picked something up. You picked up an EVP off my recorder. We
had some really good EVPs, like some really strong ones that we got, not there, but at other places. This one was very faint. I thought it said Maddie put them in because you asked, you want to tell me who put them into the cistern? And Maddie was supposed to be the person on the second floor that was supposed to be a good person. You're not the one on the third floor that you kind of broke down with, but the one that had an affair with Mr. Pierce on the second floor. Again, it was kind of a soft EVP, but I thought it said Maddie put them in. It was a very faint echo. But yeah, you picked up on also potentially a hanging, I thought. Or so you picked up on another death. I thought you picked up on like 2 deaths down there, as I recall.
Oh, and I just remembered something about the Lizzie Borden house, if we can switch back to that.
Certainly.
I picked up a lot of stuff on the upper levels there, and you had 2 tour guides with me the whole time, so they were able to verify that things happened that I was picking up on. And then we ended up in the basement of the Lizzie Borden house, and I immediately turned to a dead-end corner and pointed at it, and I went, there is a very powerful demon right there. The 2 tour guides, their mouths just dropped open because I distinctly remember one of them saying, that's where everyone says they always smell sulfur. I kind of went into a little bit of a trance, and I did my Mr. Spock mind meld thing. But the demon told me it had been there for roughly 500 years. And it was very, very happy to just hang out in the basement because every single day, multiple times a day, it had large groups of humans come through, and it was able to pick and choose who it wanted for lunch. because it was feeding these critters feed off of the negative emotions, off the vibrations that humans emit when we are angry, fearful, and depressed. Because we live in an energetic universe, everything has a vibration, everything has a frequency. That's our fingerprint, if you will. So just like the law of attraction says, thoughts are things, thoughts carry a vibration, our emotions carry a vibration. So this demon just hangs out in the basement, groups come through, it picks a couple out and starts feeding off of them. And it may or may not follow them home. But I did ask the tour guides if they wanted me to clean house, so to speak, and they were like, no. Yeah, we don't want to lose our jobs.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't have it in the film. I couldn't because really after S.K. Pierce and after Lizzie Borden, there was that kind of thing we filmed where they said how you were right on, spot on a lot of stuff. And the last thing in the film, you at the Magic Parlor in Salem, Massachusetts, you cleared a board, a Ouija board. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I sure do. Ouija boards are very, very interesting. Most people think that they're just a game. They're not. They can be, if they're used incorrectly, they can be very dangerous. I've cleared many people over the years, nasty attachments, because they messed around with Ouija boards. They really are portals to the other dimensions. Very similar to like the I Ching. The one that we did in Salem, boy, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but I think that had seven. Oh, it was 7. Okay. 7 demons in it. Yeah. So what these demons did was they took turns. There's plenty of humans to go around for the demons. So they would take turns, no kids play with it, and then a couple demons would latch onto them, and that game would be over, and then a different set of kids would come in and play with it. A couple other demons would latch on, and they would just take turns so that they were all fat and happy. This was a particularly nasty board because of everything in there. Bob, if I remember correctly, didn't we have some power issues as soon as I started working on it?
Yeah, as soon as right at the very beginning. First, you put your put your hands out to see if there was anything there, and you're like, right away you knew, yes. Right. And then right before you're going to start to clear it, then our boom mic went out. I mean, a feed was coming in, but it wasn't going into the mixer, and so we weren't getting any recording. So we had to stop for 10 minutes, and then that didn't work for the rest of the day. We had to use so we had to use like a separate boom mic for the rest of the day, not the actual mics that he had. So yeah, there was definitely a malfunction there. Yeah, and you had a hard time with it. I mean, we only show a couple minutes in the film, but it was probably a good 10, maybe even 15 minutes that you were there trying to get the crap out of there. It's, or at least it was typical. It was more than your typical 5 minutes. You kept clearing it, and there was still more stuff there and still more stuff there. We had to cut it down a lot to edit things, but it took a while to get it cleared.
I don't think I was really aware that there were that many demons in there, and they weren't coming out all at once. They were hiding, they were being evasive. They were doing all their normal stuff, because they don't want to be removed, and they certainly don't think there's any humans that are capable of removing them, although they are always surprised when I show up. So yeah, that was not an easy job, but I got him out of there at the end of the day. So
what does it mean when you clear them? What actually happens?
Well, what happens is I work with the Archangel Azrael, which is the Archangel of the Dead. I go in using divine love, and I basically box each demon in with divine love. I put them in a container made of divine love. There is no power greater than divine love in our entire universe. And this was something I picked up totally on my own when I was in my ghost hunting days, when I was out in Virginia City, Nevada, and there was a ghost trying to attack me at the old Washoe Club there, which is where Zach and the boys from Ghost Adventures got their start. And something just said, just put up a wall of divine love. And I put up a wall of love, and it could not reach me. And so that was a terrific thing.
Now that was, Brad, that was before you became a shaman, right?
Yeah. So I will wrap the beings in a container of pure love. They can't get out. I mean, they're not happy. They're basically, punching and kicking and trying to get out. And then I hand that container to Azrael, and Azrael takes it directly to the light and crosses it. As soon as he crosses it, those demons revert back to their original true form and their eternal form. they are now ready to continue working on their eternal work. We all go home at the end of the day when we die. A lot of these beings in the universe live much, much longer than we do, because when we are born with a veil of amnesia. We do not remember our connection to the divine. All of the other life forms in the universe know their connection to the divine, and they live thousands and thousands of years. Well, somewhere along the line, some of them get screwed up and they become what we call evil. That results in them showing up on the planet Earth, feeding off of people, which isn't a good thing. So then that's where I step in and begin removing them and taking them home in a very gentle manner. Now, I'm always attacked by these things. Fortunately, I am kind of, who was it? Was it John Gotti they called the Teflon Don? I'm like the Teflon shaman. I'm very fortunate that, number one, I have tremendous protection around me. The amount of powerful beings that help me with this is incredible. And number two, I am able to remove anything that attacks me in just a matter of minutes. As soon as I start arguing with my wife about something or my son and I'm just in a bad mood, I catch myself and I go, I got to clear myself. I sit down, I remove whatever's attached to me, and then, it's never a dull moment.
When I saw you at the screening, you had mentioned a lot had happened in the past 2 years, because look, you did that 2 years ago, and you've done, I don't know, maybe hundreds of things since then. I don't know, and you said your process has kind of evolved. And then you also mentioned one very scary incident in the house where you felt you were almost being enveloped in blackness.
Yeah. It was in Newton. It was owned by a church. It was built in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And there was a mother, a wife, a husband, and 2 kids and 2 dogs living there. And there was a room in the basement that always had a padlock on it. And their dogs would never, ever go in the basement. And the wife called me and said that everything was going wrong for them. And that's usually a pretty good indication that there's some kind of attachment causing problems. And I drove out to their house. And as soon as I walked in, I could feel this thing. It was evil with a far greater magnitude than anything I'd worked with previously. And this is how spirit levels me up. About every 3-4 months, I get a case where it's something I've never dealt with before. And I just have to go dive right in, and because I know I can always ask for help. And so that's what I did. I went down to the basement. I saw the locked room. It was like walking through mud in the basement. It was so dense. I went back upstairs. I sat in their living room. I put on my blindfold and my headphones. I'm listening to my drum beat. And, when you have a blindfold on, things are black. Well, I made contact with the being, and all of a sudden, the blackness in front of my eyes got about 100 times blacker, and I felt this thing envelop me. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt actual fear. I had never, ever experienced this before, and it was taking over my soul. And I immediately reached out to Jesus, Mother Mary, and Saint Germain, and I brought them in, and Jesus was there immediately, and he told me exactly what to do.
So, Brad, was that the first time that you ever called upon Jesus, or is that the first time he ever appeared to you?
It might have been the 3rd or 4th time I called upon him, because I like to take care of the stuff on my own. I don't want to bug the more powerful spirits with mundane stuff like this. However, Jesus has always told me that, it's perfectly fine for me to call on him anytime. But no, in that case, I didn't know how I was getting out of that. And when I finally packaged up the demon and handed it to him, and I saw him go fly away to the light with it, the blackness went back to regular black, and there was a lightness in my heart. And I took off my blindfold, and immediately the 2 dogs that were sitting by my feet immediately ran down into the basement. So I asked the wife to open up the locked room. I walked in, and it was horrible, Bob. My spirit showed me what happened in there, and it was around the turn of the 1900s that a single man lived there. I get the impression he was a doctor, and he had a thing for young orphan boys, and they were a dime a dozen on the streets of Boston. And he would bring them back to his house and do vile, unspeakable things to them. There were hooks on the walls. I was shown rivers of blood, running down the floor. It was awful, but it was over. And because that demon that I moved was the same demon that was there 100 years earlier, possessing the doctor, making him do all of that stuff. So that was one of those days where driving home, I was like, yes, I made a big difference today.
So you weren't like nervous at all about, oh God, that's a warning, I maybe should retire, or, or something. You're
no, absolutely not. Bob, there's very few people in the world that are able to do what I am blessed to be able to do. And I want your listeners to be aware of this, what I'm about to say, because there's a million people who say they can do this. 99% of them cannot. They cannot successfully remove a parasitic being from a human and keep it away. A lot of times all they do is just remove it and then it comes right back. They don't take it to the light and cross it. I've also been shown that when I look in on people into their spirit bodies, there are visible demons, but there are also invisible demons. There are ones that are hidden. I have to locate all of the hidden demons. And there are portals. These things need to be able to travel. So the portals are how they travel. And just like with the demons, there's visible portals and invisible portals. So I have to go in and I have to locate all of the visible demons and portals and all the invisible demons and portals, and then clear all of that stuff out. And once that's accomplished, then the individual gets his or her, life back. But most people who say that they can do depossession, they're unable to do it because they are not following through with everything that they need to, number one. And number two, there's way too many people that take a weekend workshop and then go, oh, I'm now a shaman and I'm going to hang out my shingle and call myself a shaman. And I'm sorry, I have a major problem with that. I was fortunate. I was put on the fast track. Spirit said they were going to put me on the fast track. And within 2 years of awakening, I was doing major depossession work, which I continue to do today, and other types of healing. And I'm usually the healer of last resort. When people get to me, I do not advertise, but Spirit will bring them to my website. When they contact me, Bob, usually they're saying, well, how do I know that this is going to work? Because I've already gone through 8 other healers and spent X amount of dollars and blah, blah, blah. And, if money's an issue, then I'll do it for free. Well, they still have to do a little charity work because there has to be some type of energy exchange according to the laws of the universe. But money is not the important thing. Getting them better is the important thing. And, Jesus, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. Jesus never turned away anybody because they didn't have money. Jesus helped everyone, and I try to do the exact same thing. It works about 85% of the time, and the 15-20% of the time it doesn't work. It's usually because of people can't stop thinking about what was attached to them, and they call back others. Or if you're a doctor or a nurse and you work in hospitals, those are prime places to pick up crap. So they need to be cleared quite frequently.
Now, is there another case, is it beyond that one? Is there actually, when I met you a couple of years ago, your process was kind of, and, I'm simplifying it, of course, but, putting them in a bubble of love, raising it up, and then they go off. How has your techniques changed that? And when you say you download it, what does that feel like? Can it happen anywhere where you get a download? What's that process like?
It's kind of like recognizing your intuition, where information just shows up in your head. And it just starts coming.
Now, is it when you're awake, when you're sleeping? Does it matter? Or does it vary? Or
for me, it's usually when I'm awake. Usually when I'm just meditating, just talking to the spirits. Some things have happened. I've been shown things when I sleep. But the biggest and most important stuff has happened while I was awake.
Was there another case kind of that stood out in your mind and of all the cases? Or what's that might be your most challenging experience. What was the most haunted place that you've been?
Well, the old Washoe Club is very, very haunted. I mean, I got a photo of a full-body cowboy apparition in a doorway there, and you can see the door in the wall, right through the apparition, which was pretty darn cool. But I've been in a lot of very haunted homes since then. They're all very similar, Bob. They all have the same issues. They all feel the same. They're all wreaking havoc upon the people that live there. When I finish my work and I walk out, the people that live there, the first words they say are, "Oh my gosh, it feels so much lighter in here now." That, the oppressive density of the evil spirits is gone, and it just feels nice and normal. So there really isn't I can't think of, Bob, a single case that is quite as demonic as the one in Newton, but I still have these conversations with demonic forces because, the archangels, they are a collective consciousness. Jesus is a collective consciousness. That's how they're able to be a million places at once. And the dark side has collective consciousnesses as well. And I oftentimes talk to these things. It doesn't freak me out at all, but it freaks them out because I end up sending them love.
Got to be an unpleasant conversation,
Well, not really. Not really. Okay, I'll give you one quick example. Oh my gosh, this was maybe 4 summers ago. I would have fires in my fire pit in the summer nights. And I was sitting out there one night, and I'm usually out there till midnight, 1 o'clock. And that was a great time for these evil beings to try to attack me. And so one particular evening, I'm sitting out there and I'm talking to this massive collective consciousness, just little generalities, and I'm sending it love and just asking it why it's doing what it does. And I see all these little black shadows that are starting to appear all around me. And it kept sending these beings to attack me. And so the next thing I know, I'm completely surrounded. Now, when I first became awake, one of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies workshops that I took, one of my helping spirits was Thor, and Thor gave me my own hammer, and I had never used it before. So I'm sitting there, and I said, I'll give you about 10 seconds to move everything out, and then I'm going to do it on my own. And so it kind of chuckled and didn't do anything. So I pulled out my hammer, I raised it to the sky, and invoked the power of the hammer and the power of Thor. And then I slammed it on the ground as hard as I could, and every single shadow just disappeared. They were just blown out of existence. And the
kind of a drop the mic moment, huh?
Yeah. And the collective consciousness, I never forgot this, said to me right after that happened, immediately after it happened, I got the impression it kind of looked at me a little differently and said, "You are indeed a worthy adversary." And I've that's always stayed with me. It never tried that again, although individuals do attack me, but it never tried a collective approach like that again. So yeah, there's all sorts of neat stuff that happens, and I'm just fortunate that it doesn't faze me. It doesn't scare me.
You mentioned people come to you kind of too late at the last minute. What are watch signs they should have when they should reach out to someone like you?
I'm really glad you brought that up. It's real simple. Things are falling apart. Things are going to hell. Things are bad at work. You lose your job. Your relationship's falling apart. Your car's not working. You're being thrown out of your apartment.
All those things are happening to me, Brad. That's right.
Maybe I should look in on you real quick, Bob. It's... those are the signs. And one of the biggest signs is you get angry over nothing, that the smallest thing sets you off such that you're yelling at the top of your lungs to your loved ones. And that's when you know that you've got a problem. You've got an attachment. Years ago, I worked on a medical doctor, a guy who had his medical license, and he got thrown out of his practice and lost his license to practice because of anger issues. And he was living in his car. He had nothing. He found out about me. He came to see me. I found a really nasty piece of work inside of him. I removed it. And it took him about not quite 2 years, but he got his medical license back, and he's now practicing medicine again. He told me that, there was no way anybody could have explained to him prior to that happening to him about what attachments are, because he would have just laughed at it. Now he understands. And, and he constantly tells me, once you get your healing center set up, let me know, because I'm going to come work for you, because I'm that rare breed. I'm a medical doctor who understands all of this energy stuff and understands that this makes a difference. So, it happens to all of us. It doesn't matter what rank in life you have, whether you're a millionaire, whether you dig ditches for a living. It just doesn't matter. We're all the same. We're all part of the collective consciousness here on Earth. And we should all be looking out for each other and helping each other when we notice things are going wrong. And we would be a much happier and fruitful society, if we did that. And if we taught in the schools at an early age how to manifest, the life that you want using the law of attraction, those rules, instead of all of us kind of blindly going through life, thinking, oh, life isn't fair, or life kicks me down and holds me down and blah, blah, blah. Nah, the only person that holds you down is you and your thoughts. And that's a topic for a whole other discussion.
That's a great place to stop. But can you just tell us where they can find you and how they can kind of reach out to you if they want? Absolutely.
LittleFrogHealing.com is my website. I have a contact page where you can write directly to me. I have my email on there. I also have my cell phone on there, which is 978-590-0186. 978-590-0186. Call me. And if I can't answer the phone right then, I will call you back as soon as I can. But my life, I walked away from my company that I started 25 years ago, Bob, in 2014. And I sold my shares to my partners, had no idea what was in store for me, but I knew I had to be of service to mankind 24/7. And that's what I do now. And there's nothing better in the entire universe than helping my fellow man.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a couple of years now, Brad, and, we don't hang out and have beers much or anything like that because you're a busy guy. You work like crazy. You have a side business where, during the off season, you actually have one of the best it's called Hubba's Pit Barbecue, right? And where you have one of the best, You have lines, literally the first weekend you're open, there were lines around the block. So, but you do make yourself available and you're definitely the real deal. Look forward to our second chat, my friend. Thank you so much for being on episode 1.
Thank you, Bob, for having me. It's been absolutely wonderful.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared. Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. And the world will know how swell you are.